It still says setting up your meeting, done.
It says live at this end.
Okay.
Live on YouTube.
Excellent. So hi everyone, thanks for joining us today for this live Q&A. So there's been lots of chats on our Slido this morning. And now we've got some people that we've brought together to maybe explain a little bit more or talk around it. Any new questions that are coming in, upvote them, and we'll try and handle them as well. So I thought I'd start with brief introductions. So my name's Nele, I'm the admissions coordinator for EP and PPL, but mainly for psychology. I'm the psychology coordinator for undergraduate admissions. So that's me. Emily, do you want to briefly say hi?
Hi, I'm Emily Lindsay Smith, and I'm one of the outreach officers at the Faculty of Linguistics.
Great. Dave?
Dave Leal. I do a similar job to the one Neela does in psychology for philosophy. So I heard the cats across the 8 different philosophy degrees, but I'm involved in the PPL degree in particular, and that's why I'm here now.
Excellent. Jamie?
Hi, I'm Jamie. I've just graduated from studying philosophy and linguistics at Jesus College.
Great. And then Lauren?
Hello, I'm Lauren. I'm just finished my second year studying experimental psychology at LMH.
Great. And we're expecting also Gaia to join us in a little bit. She's also one of the psychology tutors and associate professors, mainly because she's been very closely involved in making and delivering the 4th year course. So any 4th year specific questions, we're going to go straight to Gaia. So in terms of some of the most upvoted questions that we've seen, one of the big ones is around experimental psychology and what is it? So I might ask one of the students, Lauren, how do you kind of experience this experimental part of experimental psychology?
Yeah, that's a question that people ask a lot. So I think it's pretty much just quite similar to any psychology degree, except it's very focused on experimental methods. And so you learn about the history of psychology, what kind of experiments happened within those. And then later on in your degree, you'll have more of an active role in making your own experiments for your research project. We also have practicals where you learn like the principles of how to design an experiment, and you learn skills relevant to making experiments. So I think that's it. Just it's quite a scientific and quite rigorous course as well.
Yeah, that'll do. So there we always get questions on personal statements, and it might be nice to briefly talk about it. You know, what to include, should we include an EPQ, all of that information, and maybe we'll ask the tutors first what they think from their point of view. So maybe Dave first, and then Lindsay, and I can add anything else.
Okay, so the risk of anybody who was at the theology session earlier on that I was involved in hearing this again. So when I've been talking to school groups recently on personal statements, I've called the talk, because I'm very creative, personal statements. And I've said I just want to draw attention to 2 words in that title, the word personal and the word statement, and say that what's involved here is saying something that's about you. So your personal statement needs to be a good representation of your academic personality, to say things about your thinking and your work. And it needs to be a statement, which is to say it's not a piece of creative writing. It's not something that's either made up or is trying to impress us by its poetic fluency. It's trying to say things that are true about you and to show them to be true by the way in which you expand upon them. So we'd rather see you saying a few things and saying them with some backup, something, you know, I read this and this is what I thought about it, and this is how I sort of what I went to do after I did that as a result of having read this. We'd rather that was said about a few things than we would have you say, you know, just to give a big bullet point list of stuff I've read. So bear in mind that this personal statement is a personal statement, not just for us, but for probably 5 applications that you're making, including ours. And bear in mind too that for us, because we are going to have a test that you take, and we're also potentially going to interview you if you do well enough in the early parts of the process, we're going to meet you quite a bit. Whereas for the other 4 universities, the personal statement really is going to be their point of meeting with you. So bear that in mind, that although maybe you'd like to come to Oxford more than go anywhere else, and that would be great, the personal statement may actually be of more significance for the other 4 places. So don't just write it for us, write it for the whole of your application. I think that's advice that's extremely important to hear.
Emily, anything specific for linguistics, perhaps?
I'd keep in mind that anything that you write in your personal statement is fair game for us to ask an interview if you're called for interview. So it's worthwhile actually having read anything you mention in your personal statement, so you're not caught out at interview. You know, we want to see that you've read up on linguistics a bit, that you're not just sort of picking it because, ooh, I want to do philosophy and something, but you actually want to do linguistics. You know what it means to look at linguistics, and you're interested in it. So, you know, tell us what you've enjoyed learning about. And if you don't enjoy learning about it, then maybe it's not the right course for you.
Wonderful. I also want to welcome Gaia. So hi, Gaia, you here?
Hello.
Hi.
I was being shy and hiding by turning my camera off.
Anything you want to add from psychology perspective around EPQs and you know what that matters for personal statements and stuff?
No, I completely agree with Emily, and I would say, I mean, probably fair to say, not all admissions tutors ask questions about the statement, but if they do, they really like it if you remember what you wrote. So, yeah, agree completely with Emily there.
Yeah, so from a shortlisting perspective, we will skim read and we'll look at those statements, but they won't determine shortlisting for us. So it's more something that happens at the next stage. Whilst I've got Gaia, because I know Gaia can only stay half now, on the 4-year course, so we've been asked, you know, is it the same as an MSc? How does it work? Do you want to expand briefly on the 4-year masterized?
Yeah, that's great. So great question. So many universities that offer psychology have started, or psychology in combination with other subjects, have taken on board this option of a 4-year integrated master's. It is not a 3-year undergraduate course plus a 1-year master's. It's a masterized degree, a 4-year undergraduate degree with more specialization at the end. And the specialization, as we've described it, can be in different directions, in a more research-oriented direction, a more translation applied direction. So that final year builds on what's happened before, but allows for further professional development. So it's not like a standalone master, because that's a 1-year program. It's building on 3, the additional specialization, and it's called an integrated master's. And so other universities are offering now that model as undergraduate degrees. I hope that's the answer. That was the question. That was the question. But I can definitely talk more if you want. And any other question on that format, I'm very happy to answer at any point. Yeah, but I will need to leave at 2:30 because I'm then my college tutor hat in my office, which is this one, my college office here. So I'll leave then.
That's brilliant, thanks. Well, you'll be around tomorrow's on, so
Absolutely, yeah.
Questions are coming in. We seem to have some issue with our live stream not being where it's meant to be, but we're hoping people will find it and we'll be able to look back, because it's definitely streaming live, but maybe not where it's supposed to. So anyway, you can look at it a little bit later. I'm sure it will be okay. I thought whilst we have our 2 students here, there's been quite a lot of questions on, you know, what is linguistics in terms of integrated with psychology or with philosophy. I think Jamie, being philosophy and linguistics, maybe you have some perspectives that you might want to share on what it's like to do those 2 with or without. Yeah. In your case, without, I know, but still.
Absolutely. So I think one thing which is worth saying is that perhaps unlike some other universities, there are essentially 3 different faculties running separate modules. So there's no kind of centrally run modules. I guess the slight exception to that is the statistics course in prelims, but that's obviously not psychological, explicitly psychological. So even though there aren't any centrally run modules, there are a lot of modules which are kind of cross-subject or interdisciplinary. So, for example, I studied philosophy of cognitive science, which is obviously philosophy, but also quite psychological. And I also studied psycholinguistics, which obviously kind of crosses the boundaries between psychology and linguistics. But I think you also have the ability to study philosophy of mind in philosophy, and on the linguistic side, you can also study, for example, phonology, which again is quite psychological. So the idea essentially, which I'm trying to, I guess, get across is, even though you may be studying explicitly philosophy or linguistics modules, they're still quite psychological in nature. And I know from the psychology side, you can kind of specialize in like the development of language or something. So again, that's going to be like quite linguisticsy, but it's going to be an explicitly psychology module. And in addition to that, even if you just take two such as psychology and linguistics or philosophy and linguistics, you can borrow one paper without needing to take the tripartite structure. So you have a lot of ability, even if kind of your surface title is just philosophy and linguistics, to take kind of interdisciplinary options, and they are really, really good. So I would highly recommend that. But it is worth saying there will not be any kind of joint faculty modules which are specifically run by both the philosophy and psychology department or whatever.
Thanks, Jamie. Anything you might want to add from philosophy or linguistics tutor point of view, Dave and Emily?
Well, just that we do, although we don't run things together, we do talk to each other and coordinate the way that the degree is structured and worked, so that, I mean, minimally, so that when you're studying both subjects, you don't at some point find, oh, well, I won't sleep this term then, I'll just do kind of loads of everything. So we do try and sort of work the workload thing out, but we do more than that. I think we try to think right the way through the degree, including in first year. So in first year, 1/3 of the first year is something called general philosophy, and the topics in that include questions about mind-body relationship and so on that should be interesting to somebody studying psychology. And similarly, when the first year we have a paper in formal logic that is about the study of the structures of language in some degrees, and that's relevant to the linguistics paper. So if you were a philosophy and psychology candidate, you'd do that same logic paper. And that's a moment when people doing philosophy and linguistics, psychology and linguistics will meet together, perhaps share their different perspectives and different interests around a common theme. And I think that's one way in which a lot of the joint conversation happens, is in class context and more informally around the variety of people doing these different overlapping and intersecting kind of things.
I would just sort of echo that, in that even when we've got papers that are not necessarily as obviously overlapping with the other parts of the degree, your knowledge from the other parts of your degree can still inform how you respond to the essays. So certainly when I've taught particularly sort of psychology and linguistics versus modern languages and linguistics, you notice that they write different kinds of essays and are more comfortable with different aspects of the course. So even when, you know, you're just focusing on you know, one aspect that's sort of very linguistic, your psychology knowledge about actually how might we operationalize any of this, how might attention affect things, can still make a difference in how you learn and integrate all the knowledge yourself.
Thanks very much. I was going to ask another question to one of the students. So one of the questions, Lauren won't like how I'm picking her for this, was about, you know, what makes Oxford such an amazing place? But maybe from a student perspective, why did you choose Oxford? And, you know, what makes it special for you? Lauren, could you?
I think it was a combination of things, probably. So I like the idea of the tutorial system, because then you have the kind of small group interaction and you get to talk about what you've learned, and you can kind of share your own perspective on things, which I think Oxford encourages quite a lot. There's also the college system, because I quite like the idea of like having small community where you can make friends easily and you can do the social stuff within college and you can live in college and things like that. And also Oxford is kind of weird because you get tutorials in college, but you also get tutorials in other colleges as well. So it's quite cool. You get to know Oxford quite well. And then there's also other stuff as well. So Oxford has really good scholarships and bursaries. So for me, it was probably one of the most financially feasible places to go. And then also because the short terms, it also means that we don't have to pay as much rent, which is good as well. We have a good career service as well. And also I was really interested in the kind of very research-based aspect of it. So Oxford psychology has really good research as well, which I was quite interested in.
Yeah, that's maybe a good question to ask Gaia while I still have her about the research project. So the plan for the fourth year is mainly about independent study and an in-depth research project. You want to tell a little bit more about what that could involve, maybe give some examples?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much, Lauren and Nele. I mean, important thing to keep in mind that a research project will still happen even if you did decide to leave after 3 years. So that element of experience will be a part of the 3-year version of the course. And that's really important because definitely as psychologists, we want you to learn to be experimentalists, even if though the third project is shorter in duration and extent and independence compared to what the fourth year projects will be, which will be year-long, being embedded in either a lab or a clinical setting or a translational setting, and therefore working at a more advanced level in terms of independence. So that's going to be the key difference between third year projects and fourth year projects. And those projects we've tried to keep as much as possible open, in that we expect that quite a few of the students who want to take that 4-year version of the course will be interested in research, possibly in psychology and different types of research, but not all. In fact, we know that quite a few applicants and students we tutor now maybe want to move into clinical psychology, educational psychology, other aspects of psychology or not psychology at all. And so actually, keeping that final project called an extended project rather than a research project allows for that flexibility. But the key element will be it's intensive, embedded into a context for that year without ongoing courses and extended courses and lectures that you have to attend alongside it, so you can really fully concentrate on that project. But transferable skills and additional skills that might be needed that you can attend at the time when they're needed. For example, if the project is a research project, coding and programming as required at the beginning, or help on how you then apply for a PhD post, or how you develop your own proposal might be something that research-focused students will really care for, whereas similar guidance, but in the context of thinking about clinical careers, might be relevant to somebody who instead wants to stay on for that project, but for it to be more clinically oriented. And just thinking that a translational, so working within the context of NHS-focused activities that are not clinical psychology, neuropsychology or neurology and so on. Maybe, I mean, I'm really hoping that we will have those opportunities. I noticed in the chat that Vinka was saying, somebody was asking about the difference between MSc and MSci. So MSc and integrated masters. I mean, that's really a great question. And they are two different things. An MSc is a 1-year course that is a taught course with a research component. This is in psychology. There may be, in fact, maybe we could talk about MPhils in philosophy or linguistics. And MSc in psychology, in fact, the course that we do offer at this point in time is the MSc in psychological research, is a 1-year taught graduate qualification that has an element of the research project, but also important foundational courses that those students who come onto that course may not have been presented with before: statistics, coding, some groundings in psychology that they may not have had before. So typically students would come onto that 1-year course from outside psychology, or from psychology, but in a psychology environment that was a bit different to the Oxford environment. And that's why they want to do an MSc in psychological research, for example. An MSci, so an integrated master's in psychology, the 4-year version of the program, is one that is a 4-year program. So it builds the foundations in the previous 3 years and then has that additional element at the final year that is extended embedded experience. And so we do not repeat the prior coding, statistics, foundations that instead our students who stay for 3 years do have. And instead there's more emphasis on deepening the skills that are needed for the project at that point as required. So in that sense, they're different. And the integrated master's is considered, is classed as an undergraduate degree, a 4-year undergraduate degree program rather than a 1-year taught master's program at the end of, for example, a 3-year program. I hope that answers that question, but yeah, it's important, really important distinction.
Really good this is recorded, people can
Great, and you know, hopefully if there are more questions about that point, we have to get it straight in our heads. So it is the case, for example, that we have students who come on board, come to our department for the 1-year MSc in psychological research. And they come from various backgrounds, some that do not have psychology before at all. And at that point, learn about psychological research. Others who are psychologists but want to specialize or are interested in what the Oxford course offers. That's different from the undergraduate integrated master's program, which is a 4-year extended program. And I hope that's the good answer. I hope that's clear. Thank you.
I might ask again, one of the students, maybe Lauren, as you're an EP, you must have just chosen a research project. Maybe you can tell the audience a bit about what you chose, what kind of topic you're doing, what's involving.
Yeah, so I'm doing quite an ambitious one in COVID times because I was hoping to do something using EEG. So there's yeah, so if anyone doesn't know, EEG is like the cap that you put on your head, and it has all the electrodes, and then it kind of measures all of the surface activity in your brain. So it doesn't cover everything, but it gives you some information about what's going on in the brain when you're doing a certain task. And I'm hoping to use that to find out about how people process facial expressions. Yeah, and that's in a lab that someone is doing. And so yeah, I'm very much looking forward to that. But that also means that I also need to learn lots of coding, like how to analyze EEG data and how to code an experiment as well. So I think I'll have to do a lot of that to myself, but there's a lot of other resources at Oxford that you can use. So there's the IT Learning Centre, so you get half price courses on that, so you can learn Python and MATLAB and stuff like that. That's just another like random benefit that being at Oxford has. And then the tutors are also really useful as well. It can send you links to like online workshops and how to do certain things as well. So that's quite helpful.
Great, thank you. In philosophy and in linguistics, as in psychology, there's also the opportunity to do a dissertation or an extended piece of work. So I was wondering, maybe first from the student and then maybe from the tutors. Jamie, did you do an extended dissertation?
In short, I did not. Basically, very few students take one in philosophy, but it is an option that you can do. And in linguistics, I think it's pretty much the same. It's kind of like some students do, but and in linguistics also, it's worth saying you can do a dissertation, which is kind of more like a humanities sort of written exercise, but you can also do like a scientific project as well, a research project. So, and those are different. But I didn't do one, unfortunately.
Maybe Dave and Emily can give some examples of some of those projects that have gone on.
So in terms of long essays, dissertations, so I mean, people may not be quite clear what the parameters of this would be. So we're thinking about something of maybe 10 to 15,000 words long. And that's the kind of scale of one of these things. How are they chosen? Well, it would be something that you were motivated, interested to study for yourself. So you'd be, in a way, choosing the title and choosing an approach that will match that title. And towards the end of second year, so as Lauren just said with her psychology project, she's lined up for that. Well, similarly, same sort of time of year, you'd be thinking in philosophy, well, I'd like to do some work on this particular area of philosophy that I'm excited by. So you would put in a title which would then be either approved or result in a conversation with the faculty about the title, because if you've selected something that looks like it's a really good question for about 13 years of research at doctoral level, but really not a 10 to 15,000 word undergraduate essay, then, you know, we want to say, well, can we cut this down? Can we kind of make it into something that will work? If it looks like it's just going to be a literature survey, that's not a terribly good idea. We want to actually see you doing philosophy. And because philosophy is always a joint degree in Oxford, as Jamie says, not very many people do these simply because they are wanting to kind of build on their basic philosophical education rather than specialize. But you can do one of these things. What might they be like? Well, I mean, the one I've most recently marked was on the philosophy of time travel and whether this was actually a possibility or not, and what it could amount to. And we haven't actually agreed. I mean, we have agreed it's marked, but it hasn't sort of been through finals yet. So I shouldn't say too much, but the results were not encouraging for those who are keen on doing this. Those who have ambitions to time travel, it sounded like when the definition of time travel was narrowed so much that the only way to do it was to die, at that point you might think, well, actually, that's a kind of the cost benefit analysis doesn't look quite so good. So anyway, but that's the sort of thing that people might think, I'm really interested in this. I've had a sort of science fiction stuff I've been reading since I was a younger teenager, and now I really want to get my teeth into finding out if this stuff's possible, and maybe it's not. Anyway, right, Emily, save me quick. What does linguistics do?
Yeah, I think to my knowledge, I think linguistics is quite similar in that regard. Certainly, for if any of you are interested in doing modern languages and linguistics rather than PPL, certainly some people do some of the data collection if they want to do a slightly more scientific project during their year abroad. So I know someone who looked at a facet of Portuguese verbs. So while she was in Portugal, collected some data for that. So you can very much do a sort of a proper research project in the sense of, forming hypotheses, collecting and testing data, or you can do more reviewing what exists and arguing with it. So there's lots of different ways to do it, and linguistics covers such a broad range of things that if there's stuff you're interested in, there's lots of ways to get to grips further with what you're interested in.
Yeah, so you can do these dissertations also in psychology, and I just heard that Lauren is doing one. So maybe Lauren can explain what she's doing and how the process works for a dissertation and what it replaces and stuff.
Yeah, so for experimental psychology students, I don't know if you're doing psych and philosophy, I don't know if you get the option to do it then in psychology. I think they just do research projects if they want to. But for EP, in third year, you either take 3 advanced options, which is like a series of lectures and tutorials for 1 term. You can either do 3 of those, or you can do 2 advanced options and a dissertation. So I've chosen to do dissertation, and also not many people choose to do a dissertation, which is quite surprising because it's like a good thing to do if you're interested in a specific thing. But my one, I'm thinking of doing it about the development of theory of mind. I haven't got the exact title yet, but theory of mind, essentially, if you haven't heard of it before, it's like, how do we understand the mental states of others and what other people are thinking? And then I want to, I haven't got the title yet, but I want to look into what are the factors that result in good theory of mind or not so good theory of mind. But then you have to consider things like, how do you measure how people understand other people's mental states, and like, what are the factors that underlie it? So it's things like language or executive functions and family factors and things like that. So there's a lot that I can go into, and that's 8,000 words, so it's slightly shorter than other kinds of dissertations.
It may be worth saying that one of the great benefits of doing some of these research areas, especially if they are involving, as psychology ones typically will, research on human subjects, is that you learn a little bit about the ethical questions related to research as well. And this will be true in linguistics, true in psychology, more rarely true in philosophy, but it can be if we do something in practical ethics that involves interviews with people. I'm the vice chair of one of the 3 research ethics committees in the university, so we're often looking at more social scientific, in my case, more social scientific method research things, but often psychology research is in that sort of area, thinking about interactions with social media and Facebook and things like that. So I think that that's Another really good thing about doing this is that it gives you some experience of what it would be like to go on in research if you were to do that in psychology, not just in terms of what it's like to be a researcher, but also the kind of context which constrain or enable research to happen.
Thanks, Dave. I think that's a really important thing to note. Actually, I think it's clearly a big part of any research degree, and it matters a lot. We get a lot of questions on what makes a good applicant, and I know we've talked about this before and in a lot of the student perspectives as well, but it might be worth just kind of repeating a little bit of that. You know, what are we looking for? So someone asked, you know, apart from obviously getting good grades and a high score on the TSA, what else could make an applicant competitive? And the obvious thing to say here is obviously their interview performance will matter a lot. Though I've said this before and I will say it again, the interview is not the final filter. So it's not like everybody comes in and then the interview happens and that's what makes you in or out. The interview just adds more information to everything we already know. And we have known people who've not done the most greatest interview, but have had very excellent other markers that have been offered places. So it's not the final filter, but obviously performance on interview does matter. Does anyone want to add other things up? What makes an applicant competitive? There you go, Jamie. What do you think makes an applicant competitive?
So I was going to speak about the interview, but I guess what makes a good interview as opposed to a bad interview. I think one of the things that people should always remember is that you're coming to university to learn. So I think one of the classic kind of missteps that applicants make is they assume that they need to know everything, or the tutors are testing knowledge, and that is absolutely not the case. If you already knew everything, there'd be no point coming to university, and you'd also be very unique in the world in knowing everything. What they really want to see is that you can be presented with new information, things you don't currently understand, and quickly pick it up and think about it interestingly, and kind of a willingness to learn and an interest in learning. And so don't kind of feel that you don't need to know anything. I think one of the strategies that a lot of tutors use in the interviews, they try and start with something that you do know just to warm you up. And that tends to build, or can often build on the personal statements. So something you've written, you've read, or that you're interested in, because they assume that you have read it, as you said you have. So they're not really trying to kind of catch you out per se. They're just trying to warm you up. And then from there, they might divert to something you know less about. So don't be put off by that fact. And another key aspect to doing well in an interview is kind of thinking aloud, showing what thought processes you're undergoing towards learning or thinking about this new stuff. So yeah, don't feel like you need to resort to knowledge that you already have. In fact, that will certainly kind of make your application weaker in the interview.
I think following on from that, I might sort of suggest that the idea of wanting to see your thought process in an interview is quite important. You know, I care if whether or not you get the right answer is one thing, but if you've thought interestingly to a wrong answer, in some ways that's more interesting than just telling me the right answer with no thought process. So it's about seeing how you reason and how you think. So as Jamie said, we may start with questions about your personal statement, not to go, ooh, so what did you think about page 43? But to go, all right, well, I know you've read this, so what have you sort of thought about it? Can you tell me more about that? So we can sort of drill into an area that should be more preparable and thinkable, but then look at some data that you hopefully haven't seen before. And so, you know, what do you do if you've got, you know, a bit of Agba and the English translation? Can you figure out the patterns? So it's seeing how teachable you are and how you learn and how you think, I think, is the key part of the interview process.
Yeah, I think it's that unless someone wants to add something, no. So at this point, that might be.
The only last thing I would say is try and just be a nice person. I've heard from so many tutors that they often just reject students because they'd be really annoying in tutorials and really difficult to work with, and just don't come across as willing to learn. They try and just show that they know it all, and they're really smart and they're better than the tutor, and that will just probably, not only will it annoy the tutor kind of on a sociological level, but also it doesn't show that you're willing to learn. It doesn't show that you're open to new ideas. So just try and be congenial. And that doesn't mean just agreeing with what they say, especially in philosophy. I'm sure they will take the opposite position too and argue against you, but don't be unnecessarily stubborn or arrogant, and at the same time, I guess, just try and come across amiably, someone they might want to work with for 3 years of their time. They're going to invest a lot of time in you personally through the tutorial system. So just be someone who they actually want to spend time with. Perhaps it's an underappreciated factor, but I imagine it plays a significant role in ultimate choice.
This is brilliant, Jamie. Let's just hope people have that under control, how amiably they are.
It's really, really nice. Who's bringing brownies to the interview?
No, don't bring in brownies to the interview. But do, I mean, Jamie is absolutely right, though, that what we want you to do is really engage. So come in ready to listen to what you're asked, what's said to you. The interview is pretty much as much done with your ears as with your mouth. So do be ready to listen. You do not have to do, please do not do lots of research on the people who, if you know who's going to interview you first, in order to work out what they will want to hear. Tutorials are much more interesting where there's interesting and productive disagreement. So we're not looking to select people like us. That would make for a very boring 3 years. We're looking to select people who are willing to engage and really enjoy being here and really enjoy the process of thinking, communicating, engaging, arguing for the years that you're here. That's what we really want. And the interview is just one of those moments in the process where we can have a think about what that would be like. And here, Jamie's absolutely right that, you know, it is modeling the way we teach in a way as best we can in a limited space. And we certainly do want you to be somebody who can listen, think, revise ideas, stand up for ideas. And that's what we'll be wanting to see you doing.
Tutors are very aware that this is very stressful for you as well. So we really try and accommodate this. That said, sometimes it really doesn't work. I remember one interview we had where someone just I don't know, and she just completely panicked and couldn't actually get her words out. Which is at which point we said, well, this is how we're going to be teaching as well. So, if you really hate this, then this may not be for you, and that's fine. You don't have to enjoy this kind of form of teaching, but it is the kind of teaching we do. Anyway, she came back and restarted, and all was good. But it's worth considering that if you really actually don't like that process, then please know that this is how we teach.
Is it worth, Neil, at that point, just having a little footnote about interviews under conditions that I guess neither Lauren nor Jamie will have had, namely online? The process of interviewing last December for all candidates and for this coming December as well is going to be essentially an extension of what we're doing now, talking at you through a screen. And it's something we have lots of experience of. We've done it with overseas students who couldn't get visas in time in order to come. We've done it for years. But it can mean that you come to an interview not by physically getting yourself to Oxford, spending time here, sitting outside a room, waiting for the moment when the interview starts, which, for all that it can be stressful, actually is in a way a form of real preparation. Online, you can just find yourself in an interview a minute after you finish chatting to your mates outside, just after lunch. And that can mean that you don't actually prepare yourself as well as you might. And the first few minutes of the interview don't go as well as they should. The interviews are short. Please prepare for them in the sense of breathing deeply and getting yourself ready to listen and to talk, rather than just coming in a relaxed way that makes it kind of friendly chat, but a friendly chat that doesn't actually give us the opportunity to probe as deeply as we otherwise might. This is a particularly special thing to say to you for this coming December, when everything looks like it is going to be online again. It's a different experience for us. It's a different experience for you too. We've got a reasonable amount of experience of it. You may very well not have any experience of this. So, recognize that that's a different thing from a lot of the videos online about how to be interviewed. They will expect that the interview is happening physically present in a tutor's room here. It won't be. It will be different. Treat that seriously and think about how that will be for you as well. Sorry, Nina, but I think that's a dimension that's special for this year.
Yeah, it's very good to reiterate that this is how it's going to happen this December round. It has been decided that all interviews will again be online. So it's worth stressing that and the different situation. Jamie,
another thing to kind of stress is that point that Elliot again said, is this idea of kind of like tutors really are like, they're going to be very welcoming and really, really lovely. I think in applicants' head, certainly in my head, it's kind of, I'm going into like, you know, the dragon's nest. They're going to attack me. They don't like me, blah, blah, blah. It's not like that at all. They're really, really welcoming. There's a story I say every year, and I'll say this year, is, you know, I showed up to one interview. I'm diabetic. My sugar levels were running low. I was kind of like all over the place. Couldn't really think. And I just walked in and I said, you know, I'm really sorry. I'm currently having a hypo. Can I have 5 minutes? And they were really lovely. They said, you know, take 10. And they completely understood when the kind of the, you know, start of the interview was a little bit shaky. And I grew into it a bit more, and they were very kind about that. And I think that is exactly how it's going to be. They will be really lovely, and they're really understanding. They're trying to make you feel welcome, and the, you know, the first 5 to 10 minutes will probably be kind of warm up to get you into the groove, as it were. And the other thing which is kind of comes out of that story is, if you do have some sort of extenuating circumstance, and particularly an immediate one, say you're panicking, just ask for a couple minutes, and I'm sure they will be more than happy to give you that. But even if it's just a question that you've been asked, you've been thrown off guard in the middle of the interview, ask for 1 or 2 minutes and just take that time to yourself. That's completely okay. So just, you know, I think a lot of applicants kind of psych themselves out, which they don't really need to do. So it's just worth bearing that in mind.
It's also worth saying that that has a particular dimension as well, whether online. If you say, can I have a couple of minutes, then the camera goes blank, and then you come back and you answer the question fluently and perfectly, we might wonder whose answer it was. But, you know, we've got to deal with these things as we find them. We probably will change the question if you come back.
The other thing I'd add to this discussion of interviews is you'll have more than one interview. If you feel like one interview's gone bad, try not to psych yourself out for the following ones. It may not have gone as bad as you think it did, because what we're looking for might be different to how you're conceptualizing it. But we do take into account the whole breadth of information, you know, how you are across all of the interviews, the other information in your application. So it's not that, you know, if one interview goes badly, you've messed it all up irrevocably. It's all a sort of complex, multifaceted thing that we're taking into account. So just sort of try and do your best for each one and not worry too much. When I did my interviews as an undergraduate at Oxford, I enjoyed them and I learned things. And I still remember the things that I learned, and I really enjoyed that. And I think trying to approach it as, ooh, this is going to be enjoyable and I'll learn stuff and I can engage with really interesting ideas, rather than going, oh no, they're trying to catch me out. Because we're trying to find people to teach. You know, we want our applicants to do well. We want to find people who, you know, will do well here, who we can teach. So it's, you know, it's more that we're trying to find people, rather than we're going, oh no, we won't have, you know, oh no, this is terrible, that's terrible, that's terrible. We're looking for the good in you ultimately. And ultimately it'll also come down to who else applies. That you can be brilliant, but there might just be a few slightly more brilliant people. So, you know, whatever the result, you know, if you don't get the result you want, it's not that, you know, it's not a failing on your part. It's however far you get through the process is good. And I hope that you enjoy it no matter what happens.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar to what Jamie said. So, like, the interviews themselves don't necessarily completely reflect what the tutorials would be like. Obviously, they're going to be a lot more intense because they're trying to assess how you learn and things like that. But when you actually do tutorials when you're in Oxford, then you get used to it a lot more, and they still try and challenge your ideas and try to teach you new things and try to come up with your own conclusion, see what you think about things. But it's not as scary as the interviews. So a lot of people might have never had an experience of having an interview like that before, so don't be completely disheartened if you find it really scary, because when you go to Oxford, it's not actually too intense. It is still quite rigorous and intense, but it's not as bad as the interviews. And then if you do enjoy the interview, then that's a really good sign that I think you'll like it at Oxford as well. That's good.
Excellent. I'm just going to expand a little bit on this, you know, what makes a competitive applicant, and try and cover a few questions. So we've been asked quite a lot about GCSE performance, equally about gap years, which A levels to choose. So I might just take this one myself and briefly tell you what's the deal here. So if you have done GCSEs, we will look at them. We look at them in context to your cohort and to whatever your circumstances are. And if there is special extenuating circumstances, that maybe mean that for one of those GCSEs you did quite poorly for illness reasons or anything else contextual, then we will take that into account. So those GCSE scores are definitely taken within context. That's the first thing to say. The second is if your GCSEs maybe weren't great, but you're now really picked up and you're doing amazingly, it might be a good idea to wait for your A-level results because those might actually trump whatever you've got as GCSE results. So if you're really committed to going to Oxford, but maybe didn't have the greatest GCSEs, then we would always say come back with achieved grades. And so that gets to that question of, what do you think about a gap year? And this is not the case for all courses in Oxford, I must say, but for psychology and PPL, I presume as well, unless Dave or Emily tells me otherwise, we don't have, whether or not this is achieved grades or this is predicted grades. We won't look at you differently, except for the fact that if you have achieved them, it's pretty much a safe bet. So there's nothing to say, please don't take a gap year if you've got a good reason to do something interesting as well, and you achieve your A-level grades with your A-levels, then we'd be very happy to consider those, and that would trump any GCSEs. Lauren wants to come in.
Yes, I want to say something interesting on that point. So for my GCSEs, I only got one A star for GCSE, but I also got the highest in my year. So when I applied to Oxford the next year, I also got quite bad TSA result as well, so I didn't get in the first time round. But then I went on something called the LMH Foundation year, which is like a fully funded access course for students from underrepresented backgrounds. So if you went to a comprehensive school where no one's ever been to Oxbridge and your GCSEs aren't that great, but they're still high relative to your cohort, then that was a good thing for me to do. I don't know if they're still running a foundation year later on, but it's basically just the idea of that people don't always have the right circumstances to get the right grades, and that might not be within their control. And then for sixth form I went to a grammar school, and then I ended up getting like 2 A stars and an A for A level. So it kind of shows upward trajectory. And then when I went on the foundation year, they kind of support you in applying through UCAS, and you do your course, which is, for me, was your psychology, and you also do other stuff which helps you learn how to study at Oxford. So there's a lot of access courses like that, even if your grades aren't amazing, if you come from an underrepresented background. And then, as Nelly said, you can also do a gap year as well, and then maybe try again next year if you're really committed to going to Oxford. But then, having said that, going to Oxford isn't the be and end all. So even just going to any good university is also fine. Yeah.
Yes, Dave, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, well, I can certainly follow up on some of that. One thing to say about planning for a gap year, which has already been suggested, is don't just think I've been involved in education for years, I fancy a year out now, so I'll take a year out. We want really to see some constructive thought about that year. Lots of people find when they get to the end of their degree that they need to have a gap at that point to think about career prospects or what happens next. And we do want people who are enthusiastic about study, who would actually want to be nowhere better than thinking about their subject. So if the gap year is just because I'm tired of study, that in itself is a kind of not very great thought. But beyond that, just to say that on the one hand, if you're applying on a gap year, having taken your exams, yes, you obviously have that strong benefit of already having the grades. If you apply ahead of having your grades, if you apply to take a gap year after you've applied, then because we're looking at your application alongside all the other applicants who are applying this year, but you're not applying for this year, you're applying for the next year. So we need to assess your application against the people we haven't seen yet. We don't know yet. They haven't even engaged with us yet. And that's really quite difficult. So if you are the kind of solid, strong candidate who would get in for your course in any year, then that's fine. You'll be, you'll probably get an offer. If on the other hand, you're somebody who would be very marginal in this year's entry and you've applied for a gap year, it's less likely that you'll get an offer, because it might be that really top quality people come next year who are better than you, who would take the place if only you hadn't been already offered one. So it can be slightly more difficult, but it's certainly not the kind of course as certainly in some universities, maths might be, or engineering might be, or physics might be, medicine certainly in most places is, where we simply frown on taking a gap year. We don't do that. But it would be good if it was something constructive, whether it's learning a language or working in a kind of school context or something. There are different things that you might have access to do with that year. If it looks like it's going to be a positive enhancement to you, so somebody who applied for PPEs, politics, philosophy, economics, a few years ago in my college wanted to go off to Egypt and learn Islamic law for a year. That was great. I mean, that was terrific. So, there can be really good projects. And then there can be people who are really just a little bit tired of the whole education thing. That's kind of that unnerves us, and that's not such a good thing.
Yeah, I think this is an important difference to highlight, whether you're applying for a deferred entry or whether you're applying with achieved grades for entry in that year. We would almost always recommend to apply for the year you want to go, except for, everything that they've just explained. Anything else on what makes a good applicant and GCSE?
I mean, we did say something. You did mention that one of the things that was asked about was about sort of subjects and things. You've heard a little bit, everybody's heard a bit about GCSEs being taken in context, and Lauren said a bit about that something might not look like it's a particularly impressive run of GCSEs against an average Oxford applicant, but it might, in the context of your school, be the most impressive run of GCSEs ever. We know that at the moment, GCSEs and A-levels are not straightforward to assess. All of the historical data we've got doesn't apply to COVID times at all. It's going to be at least 2024's application process, not entrance, but 2024's application process, before we have a cohort of people who haven't been affected at GCSE or A-level by the pandemic, and it might be longer than that. So we are, in a sense, flying a little bit blind on some of this stuff, but we will be able to look at your performance in the context of your school and your schooling, and that's one thing we can absolutely do. In terms of subjects, all three subjects, philosophy, linguistics, psychology, have an investment of a different kind, but an investment in analytical skills, in mathsy kind of skills. All of us are keen on that, whether it's data analysis, logic, probability and statistics. So if your GCSE maths was poor, by which, relative standards is sort of 6 and below kind of thing, if it's down there and, you've done no maths since and nothing mathematical, that's a concern. But if your GCSE maths is 7, 8, 9, A star, that kind of level, that's absolutely fine. We can build on that. And we do ask you at A-level for psychology to be doing at least one science or maths. And, if you're doing more, that's fantastic. So that's for psychology. For philosophy, really, core subjects, core facilitating subjects are much more important than, for example, philosophy, religious studies. Doing core things, chemistry, actually, it turns out, is a terrific indicator for success in philosophy because it's analytical enough and it's applied thinking-y enough. And linguistics is one of the subjects at university that actually values not just English literature, but English language, I think, as well. Is that right, Emily? So there's lots of subjects where English language would be regarded as quite a poor relation to English literature. Linguistics, I'll hand over to Emily now, but I think that's not true in linguistics.
Yes, I think in linguistics, English language does matter because it's all of these skills about how you deal with language. So we're also definitely interested if you have studied another language before, because then that gives you broader linguistic awareness about the things that do exist in language. However, you know, we do sometimes have applicants who don't have a background in other languages, so it's not, and we know that not everyone has the opportunity to. So certainly it can be a very valuable part of your application, but if that, you know, hasn't been possible for you, then it's not, you know, the be all and end all of your linguistics opportunities, I would say. But, you know, we do, linguistics it's very analytical and it's about looking at patterns. So we do want to see that you've done that, but there are lots of areas in which you can learn how to look at patterns. So we take quite a broad range of things.
I think studying grammar in any language, French, German, Arabic, Latin, whatever it may be, is a really good way. That's how I did it. I also think you can hone those skills by looking at the UKLO, that's the United Kingdom Linguistics Olympiad, which I think is really brilliant preparation for a linguistics interview. Because often what happens is you're going to be presented with a data set of some variety from a language you almost certainly don't know, or which has been made up, and asked to analyze it in some sense. And that's exactly what you have to do in the Linguistics Olympiad. If you're looking for slightly easier versions of those types of questions, you can look at the archived linguistics section of the MLAT, which I should emphasize you do not need to do anymore, but they exist and they are good practice, and they are the kind of thing you'll be presented with in the interview. Again, you don't need to do it. And if you're looking for harder versions of those, although you probably won't need to, you can look at the International Linguistics Olympiad if you're just kind of getting a bit interested in it. It's a lot of fun.
And it may be worth saying there are members of the linguistics faculty who have only one language, and they get on kind of fine. You know, there are people like me in philosophy who struggle even with one language, so that's fine as well. Neela, come on, tell us what we should say next.
Yeah, I was going to ask next about jobs, because we get asked all the time, you know, what kind of jobs can you do after EP, after PPL? So maybe, actually, Jamie, you've just graduated. What is your plan? It might be a very personal account.
So grades permitting, which I receive in about half a month, I have offers to study at a master's degree at Oxford and at Cambridge. So thank you very much. But yeah, basically masters, not very interesting. You can definitely go into the working world, though, I should say. You don't have to become a philosopher or a linguist, whatever. You can go into law. To be honest, I think you can really go into anything except something like medicine or astrophysics. And I think the working world nowadays is very much one which you can apply for many different routes, and the kind of stuff that you will have studied in philosophy, linguistics, or psychology will be very applicable, especially a lot of the stuff in psychology. The data science, the data analysis is going to be extremely popular with a lot of the different jobs which are popping up nowadays. But yeah, I would strongly think about kind of the ability to go into something you may not initially think you can go into, so law, journalism, but also investment banking. You know, I remember hearing a fact from at one point saying like the subject which gets the most people into investment banking is classics or something, and that's not because classicists learn about investment banking. Of course not. It's because they have really great analysis skills and choose to apply that. So I would definitely say that unless you're looking at like medicine or something explicitly scientific, you can get a job no matter what, and you don't have to go into further studies such as myself.
It's probably worth saying on the medicine front is that a lot of people do actually apply for graduate entry medicine after psychology. So that kind of route toward graduate entry medicine is very much open to people who've done psychology as well. Maybe some further comments on general jobs. I mean, people end up in everything, right?
Yeah, they do consultancy, advertising, quite a wide variety of things. And I was too going to make that point about medicine. I think if you've done philosophy and psychology, then you've got some of the neuroscientific background probably, and you've got some of that capacity to think analytically and listen carefully to argument and stuff that's valuable in the kind of context. I mean, one of our medical tutors says that for him, actually, the best degree to go on to do before graduate entry clinical medicine is actually engineering, not something medical at all, because it's about problem solving in the real world. but the people who went down the biomedical sciences route and then wanted to do medicine are actually less effective than people who've done something like psychology or something that's given them the right kind of insights, but given them a different kind of training. So yeah, so don't lose that thought. Neela's predecessor in her role, his favorite "what did somebody do after graduating" was going to work in on a game reserve in South Africa, I think, which is got to be one of the best things to do with an EP degree of all time. But that, I think the openings there are relatively rare. So don't think of this as a standard career path at all. Emily, what about linguistics?
Our graduates go on to do all kinds of things. I think, you know, with linguistics, you can end up in a sort of, I can do editing and get a bit stuck, but actually you can do basically anything. Linguistics gives you a really broad range of transferable skills and knowledge about how people work and how they think and how things can be communicated most effectively. So I know someone who, admittedly after a master's degree in linguistics as well, has gone off and she now works as a designer at a startup doing it's working on an AI to help do coaching. I know people who've gone into publishing. I know quite a few people who stay in academia, given what my job is. But people go on to do all kinds of things. So the limit is more your imagination rather than the degree that you do, I think is the way to put it.
And a lot of auditing. I always hear a lot of people go into auditing, like some of the big firms definitely recruit lots of people for auditing, also from EP and PPL. Okay, well, it is 3 o'clock. Thanks to everyone for tuning in and for being around. Our students will still be on the Slido answering questions that we've not answered, and we'll be here again tomorrow, same time, 2 o'clock. So any questions that you want us to talk about, let us know, and we'll try and address more of it tomorrow as well. So thanks to all of you also for contributing, really much appreciated.